In this week's episode of the Stockscores Market Minutes, I'm going to look at 3 strategies that you can use to make money when the stock market is crashing. I'll then do my regular weekly market analysis. We'll figure out if there is more crash to come. We're going to look at the day trade of the week on NI, and I'm going to do a market scan that you can do in the weeks ahead to take advantage of lower prices. So I think that there are 3 ways that you can profit from a market that is correcting. We've had some pretty strong weakness in the month of January, and really for the small caps going back a number of months, and that creates opportunity. There are 3 things you can do. You can short sell with the market trend, alternatively buying inverse ETFs, which of course go up when the market goes down. You can also trade alpha stocks. Alpha stocks are those that are trading abnormal volume, trading on their own story. And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Or you can try bottom fishing stocks that have become oversold, that have gone too far down in price based on the emotion in the market. So when fear takes hold, you get these stocks that just sell off too much, and that creates opportunity. Now, the key is to start with an analysis of the market to define the best approach. You always want to consider trend and whether the market is overbought or oversold and what state the market is in. So here we have a chart of the IWM, and let's just take a look at the patterns here. First of all, you want to short sell the market when you get a breakdown from a pattern. So here we had this trend line that was broken early in January. That would be a signal to short because you're breaking down. Here you have a flag pattern, you broke down there. That would be a signal to short sell the market, or of course you could buy an inverse ETF. Now then you have the market getting oversold. How do you know when a market's oversold? Well, if I draw a trend line across the tops, anytime we have run far away and below the trend line and then start to move up, you're bouncing back from being oversold. So we had that on January 24th, and then we had it this past Friday. And in that situation, you want to look for stocks that are doing something similar, that are oversold and making a bounce back. All right, so let's take a look first at the chart of a stock that's trading abnormally and is therefore an alpha stock. These are the kind of stocks that you can day trade through a correction, and they can still go up despite market weakness. What are the characteristics of an alpha stock? They are trading abnormal volume. So this is a 1-minute chart going back a couple of days. And on Friday, this stock was trading very abnormal volume. And so then you just look for pattern signals on that. There's a action candle break from a flag pattern, and that led to this nice upward move. Now the alternative, or another way to trade a correcting market, is to look for those stocks that are bouncing back from being oversold. So if I draw a trend line on this chart, it looks something like that. Well, down here, I'm quite oversold. That was on the 24th of January. And then we broke the parabolic downward trend line, and then we broke up from a rising bottom. So the market had pushed this stock too low out of panic, and then you started to see it turn as it broke trend lines and broke up from a rising bottom. This on the 13-minute chart. And here you can see a nice 3 or 4 day run to the upside that came out of that overbought nature. So if you want to make money in a market that is correcting or crashing, number 1, short the market when it starts to break down or buy inverse ETFs. Number 2, trade alpha stocks. You can still make money buying stocks, but it has to be on stocks that are not correlated to the market, and those are the alpha stocks trading abnormal volume. And then third, look for what I call the crash reversal pattern. Stocks that have sold off very sharply and then build a rising bottom and start to move higher. We'll do a market scan at the end of this video, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, let's get into the rest of our analysis, starting off with the US markets. And here we have the S&P 500 30-day 60-minute chart. And you can see there's the downward trend lines, and we got oversold on the 24th and bounced back to the trend line, got stuck at the trend line, got a little oversold again, but on Friday we're able to break the first of the downward trend lines from a rising bottom. So that points to this market probably going higher next week, at least to get back to this less steep downward trend line. So I expect that next week, good chance that you'll see stocks make a little bit of a short-term comeback. The issue comes up on the long-term chart. Here's your long-term upward trend line. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when that trend line was broken. Now the trend line was broken after hitting a new high. There is no falling top. So this may just simply point to a market that's going to go sideways for a little while. We may bounce back next week, perhaps bounce back for a couple of weeks, stall at the all-time highs, and ultimately head sideways. If we actually build a falling top and then roll over again, well, then I'm going to be more concerned that we're going to see more substantial selling pressure, perhaps taking us down to the 380 level on SPY. So I'll keep you updated each week on this chart, and we'll figure out what's likely to happen. But short term, I think the market bounces back. Long term, I'm still quite nervous about where the market is going to go. NASDAQ 100 has had a steeper sell-off than the S&P 500. The tech stocks have sold off more. They went through this support zone, but they're trying to come back to get above it. Still a fairly weak chart, but one that is oversold, and so we should see a little bounce this week. On the IWM, similar situation, really has been beat up more than the large cap stocks, more than the tech stocks, has become very oversold. We're far below that trend line, and so price should move up in the short term. Long term, there is still a lot of work to be done before this can be considered a healthy chart. All right, looking at the Canadian markets now, not as bad as the US markets, largely because of the emphasis of oil stocks on the Canadian market. And here you have the chart of the TSX 60, which, from a trend standpoint for the last month is really sideways. It's had quite a bit of volatility in the last week, but that volatility gave way to a break of the downward trend line from a rising bottom, and that should point to the market moving up into these resistance zones in the next week or two. Long-term chart looks better than the S&P 500, again, because of that support that we get from the energy sector, and it really hasn't made a strong break of the upward trend line. It is flirting with it, but it's managed to hold, and therefore I think that the Canadian market probably going to go sideways for a little while, perhaps building an ascending triangle pattern. TSX Venture, pretty weak, like the Russell 2000. Generally speaking, stocks are oversold, but there's a lot of work to do to overcome the pessimism. On to currencies. US dollar had a strong week this week, and that has an effect on things like gold. The US dollar perhaps going up because the market's speculating that US interest rates will rise, and that makes the US dollar more enticing. Bitcoin has fallen through support this week, but managed to come back to close above it. So again, quite oversold. I think likely to make a little bounce back in the short term, and for a day or swing trader, there may be opportunities to make money on the long side on these cryptocurrencies, but there is still a lot of work to be done before their charts get healthier. Here's Ethereum, has come into this support zone, showing signs that it's going to bounce back from being oversold, but we're talking about the bounce back that might last a week or two. There is still a lot of work to do before we can call it a bullish chart. Interest rate chart, not much movement on the TBT, and again, I use this one because it goes up when interest rates go up. Now you can see that volume is increasing, and so more and more people taking an interest in interest rates going higher, and the chart is getting better, but it still needs to build some rising bottoms, still needs to get through that resistance level. I think long-term interest rates likely headed higher, but it's not for sure at this point, by no means. Commodity charts, there's the gold chart. You can see the effect of the strong US dollar on gold. Gold had a rough week this week as the US dollar went higher, and so it remains in the pattern that we talked about last week, which is that compressing volatility pattern. We need to see a break. Is it going to break down? Then the market's going lower on gold. Is it going to break out of the pattern? That would be an indication it goes higher. We have neither right now, and so we have to be sort of ignoring gold for now, but watching it closely. Oil had another strong week despite the strength of the US dollar, and it continues to be in an upward trend, perhaps a little overbought. And then finally, the fear chart. We've had that eruption of fear in January, but it is by no means a panic yet. And that's why I think we could still see another round of weakness. Perhaps after a little bounce back in the short term here, we could roll over and see another phase to this stock market crash and correction. All right, well, let's take a look at my ratings then. I am bearish long-term on the US stock market, neutral short-term, that's a raise from last week, neutral on both time frames for Canadian stocks, gold neutral on both time frames, and oil bullish on both time frames, although it is getting a little overextended to the upside. There was some panic selling that created a trading opportunity for a bounce back in stocks, and that should play out in the short term. Now, while I expect stocks are likely to move up this week, I'm still concerned about the long-term upward trend that has been broken for large cap US stocks, and that may bring further weakness perhaps a few weeks out, perhaps even a couple of months out. Now, gold has stalled, oil is overbought, but it is strong. All right, now let's take a look at the day trade of the week. And again, returning to that idea that even in a downward trending market, you can profit from stocks that have the characteristics of alpha. Now, of course, the characteristics of alpha are abnormal volume. And you can see that this stock, NI, was trading abnormal volume on Friday. And when I have a stock like this, a stock that's obviously trading on its own story, I just look for pattern setups. I look for, pullbacks to the upward trend line where we break the pullback, and you can see it happened on a number of occasions. And you just buy them here, sell them there, buy them here, sell them there, buy them here, sell them maybe at the end of the day on this one, or perhaps there. You're just taking little hit and run trades. And in a weak market, you have to take that attitude that you're not trading for home runs, you're trading for base hits, and you got to be pretty cautious and selective. All right, now let's jump into the Stockscores market scan and take a look at something called the crash reversal scan. Now, you can set this up on your own if you are a Stockscores member. I've set it up to look for stocks greater than $1 with a bullish candle, with the moving averages, medium and long term, both bearish, that made at least a 3% gain over the last trading day and trade good volume, at least 5,000 trades. Now, I can also add in medium trend and long trend set to bearish. So in other words, you want stocks that are in bearish trends but had a strong upward day on the most recent day. Now, let's just for fun change the price range to stocks between $20 and $50. And what we're looking for here when we run the scan is looking for charts that are trying to break their short-term downward trends from a rising bottom. Now, you'll notice we're getting a lot of candidates on this strategy because the market had a good comeback on Friday. So I can then go into the charts and I will try to show you some examples of what we're looking for. So here is obviously a stock that's really been pummeled lower. The question is it breaking any kind of downward trend line? The answer is no, it is not, at least not on the daily time frame. Now, we can also check the short-term time frame. So here is the 1 month time frame, and you can see that it broke the parabolic trend there on the 24th and is starting to build a rising bottom. So if it could now break this downward trend line from a rising bottom, it may then move up to the next level of resistance. So we're using basic chart skills, basic chart reading skills, the sort of things that I teach in the different courses that we do at Stockscores. You can learn more about those on the trader training page at stockscores.com. Just under here, go to learn how to trade, learn all about the different courses we do. For now, let's try to find some other examples. So here I see INSM. I'm going to make this a 1 month chart. I'm going to look at that chart. And again, I don't see a break of the downward trend line. But what I'm trying to show you is something that may work next week because the market had a good bounce back on Friday. And if we can build rising bottoms on stocks like this that are quite oversold, this stock a few weeks ago was at 28, it hit 20. And if it can start to break these downward trend lines from a rising bottom, it can move higher. This is something that worked extremely well after the COVID crash. And we've got so many stocks that have made these strong sell-offs. They're ripe for a bounce back. We just need to wait for the signal. The signal is the break of a downward trend line from a rising bottom. So on a stock like this, IMAB, if I take a look at the intraday chart, again, the 1 month chart, I can see that strong downward move. So watch next week for a break of that downward trend line from a rising bottom on any of these stocks. And if you run scans like this or just look at charts in general, you should be able to find some good ones next week. All right, so hopefully you've enjoyed that, learned something from it. If so, please click on the like button, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, tell your enemies, and most importantly, trade well.